think I'm leaving hungry? Not today. I'm feeding my kids one way or another. I'll be back next month when the car hits. Y'all better stock up.
I got kids at home. What am I supposed to do? Starve to death?
Ma'am.
No, I ain't leaving this here. I said what I said. I'm leaving with it, all of it. Y'all can call the cops if you want to. Jesus. My husband's in the Uber waiting right outside. You think I'm joking?
Ma'am, please.
I'm gone.
Y'all, if they cut my EBT, I'm walking right out of them stores with every bit of them groceries. Ain't nobody stopping me. $2,000 a month, and they think they gonna take it? Hell nah. Huh?
Why are y'all asking me how many baby daddies I have? Why are you asking me why I don't work? First of all, I have 7 baby daddies, okay? The reason I did that was so that I don't have to work, so that I can raise my kids, so I can take care of my kids. There's so many mothers out there that do this. And in order to make ends meet, yes, I do live off the government. I am on Section 8. I do get $2,000 in food stamps per month. I'm not getting enough.
Some are calling it the Food Stampacalypse. I think I'm partial to Food Stampalooza, but nobody asked me, and these decisions are made well above my pay grade anyway. The point being, if you're in need of making a trip to the grocery store, you should probably do it today, tomorrow at the latest, but definitely not Saturday. And you can often get a sense of how serious a situation is when the people in your life become aware of it who are normally, how to put this charitably, low information types who aren't as highly attuned to the daily political goings-on as some of the rest of us are. In other words, people whose worldviews are limited to whatever happens to pop up in their social media feed, which is to say, you may have had some such people coming up to you this week, staring quizzically at their phones saying, "Are people really going to start looting grocery stores this weekend?" And I guess the easiest answer is, yeah, probably, depending on the neighborhood where you do your grocery shopping. But the long and short of it is, due to the Chuck Schumer Democrat Party government shutdown of 2025, the disbursements for the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program, SNAP to its friends, which most people still just call food stamps, will not be going out on the 1st of November, and some people are very upset about it. What kind of people are upset about it? Well, based on the very angry, very threatening videos they've been posting, it would seem to be mostly able-bodied adults of working age who can afford fancy $1,200 smartphones, but for some reason rely on the Federal Department of Agriculture to pay all of their food expenses every month. Which would seem to beg the question, if you're an able-bodied adult of working age who can afford a $1,200 smartphone, if you're capable of the level of physical exertion necessary to loot a grocery store, why again are you on food stamps? It's Thursday, the 30th of October. This is Curmudgeon's Corner. From high atop the battlements of Castle Curmudgeon, where the orange stamp entitles you to one fresh chicken, but you will have to kill it and pluck it and dress it your damn self. Good afternoon, Mr. and Mrs. America and all ships at sea. Welcome to Curmudgeon's Corner. Let's talk about Henry Wallace. If the name Henry Wallace rings a bell in your head, it's probably because he was the third of Franklin Roosevelt's 4 vice presidents, in which capacity he served from January of 1941 to January of 1945, which was the only 4-year period in our history when we've had a guy who was an actual communist, or if not an actual communist, then very, very communist adjacent, a heartbeat away from the presidency. Wallace was so communist adjacent, in fact, that it even made the Democrats skittish. So when FDR, who everyone could tell was only months away from dropping dead, decided to run for a 4th term in 1944, the party knew they had to get Wallace the hell off the ticket, because we can't run the risk of a communist pacifist president taking office when we're still in the middle of fighting a world war. So they swapped him out for the moderate centrist piano-playing haberdasher Senator Harry Truman of Missouri, and when Roosevelt died less than 100 days into his 4th term, which may have come as a shock to the public at large, but everybody in Washington knew it was coming, Truman becomes the president. He drops the bomb on Japan, which Henry Wallace probably would never have done, and the war is over. But before he was the communist-adjacent vice president, Henry Wallace was the communist-adjacent Secretary of Agriculture, a post he held throughout Roosevelt's first 2 terms in office from 1933 to 1940, and the first federal food stamp program in U.S. history was his own brainchild. In the mid and late 1930s, as you know, we are still in the teeth of the Great Depression. We have instituted a whole boatload of New Deal federal top-down socialist programs to try and ameliorate the effects of the Depression, which have had varying degrees of success. But no matter what your FDR cheerleader teachers taught you back in school, he is not the man who solved the Great Depression. Admiral Yamamoto is the man who solved the Great Depression when he attacked Pearl Harbor and pulled us into the war. But when Henry Wallace is running the agriculture department and he dreams up the original food stamp program, he's actually got 2 problems that he's trying to solve. We've already instituted a system of cash aid for families that are down on their luck, the program that we now call AFDC, but that's got nothing to do with the agriculture department. The problem on the agricultural side of things was that farmers were growing surplus produce, but the people of the country were too unemployed and too impoverished to be able to afford to buy it. The man Henry Wallace hired to be the administrator of the food stamp program, a guy from Texas by the name of Milo Perkins, and I guess with a name like Milo Perkins, it goes without saying that you're from Texas. He summed it up with the following metaphor. We got a picture of a gorge with farm surpluses on one cliff and undernourished city folks with outstretched hands on the other. We set out to find a practical way to build a bridge across that chasm. So the idea went like this. For families that were already receiving cash relief, they could take a portion of that cash relief and buy food stamps with it. You had orange food stamps and blue food stamps. The orange stamps could be used at any food retailer or wholesaler, but they exclude alcoholic beverages, concession stand meals that are eaten on the premises, and tobacco products. The blue stamps could only be used to buy what the USDA defined as surplus produce, which included items like beans and eggs and fruit and so forth. For every $1 of orange stamps that you bought, you got 50 cents in blue stamps. So as a practical matter, if you were a poor family receiving cash assistance, the government was subsidizing 50% of your food budget in order to help the country's agricultural producers stay afloat. How well did the program work? Well, it's impossible to say, really. It lasted for 4 years, from the spring of 1939 to the spring of 1943, and then it was eliminated because the conditions that necessitated its creation no longer existed. Why did they no longer exist? Because we were now in the thick of fighting 2 foreign wars, a war in Europe and a war in the Pacific. We had several million men deployed overseas, full employment at home, and nothing that our farmers produced was being wasted. But the tale of the tape, for whatever it's worth, says that in the 4 years it existed, the original food stamp program, FSP to its friends, reached a total of 20 million people in around half of the counties in the United States at a total cost to the federal government of $262 million. And then, believe it or not, there was a period of nearly 2 decades, 1943 to 61, when there was no such thing as food stamps. From time to time, there were proposals in the Congress to reestablish a food stamp program, but none of them ever got past the committee level or gained sufficient critical mass to become part of the national political conversation until the fall of 1960, when the junior senator from Massachusetts, a young man by the name of John F. Kennedy, told a crowd in West Virginia that if I am elected president, I will sign an executive order on my first day that restarts the federal food stamp program. And this was probably the first time a presidential candidate ever made one of those types of promises, those I will do this on day one promises that are such a standard feature of our presidential campaigns now. But Kennedy actually followed through and did the thing he said he was going to do. He really did sign that executive order on the afternoon of his inauguration day. And yes, I know what you're thinking now. You're thinking, but by what authority can the president simply conjure a food stamp program into existence by executive fiat? Well, it's a good question, and I'm glad you asked. The authority by which Kennedy restarted the food stamp program was actually contained in Public Law 86-341, which was passed in September of 1959 as part of the Congressional Appropriations Bill for fiscal year 1960, which authorized the Secretary of Agriculture to operate a food stamp system through January 31st, 1962. But the Eisenhower administration simply chose not to exercise that authority during their last year in power. The pilot programs that Kennedy authorized were still based on the framework of the 1939-43 program, so they retained the requirement that the food stamps be purchased, but they eliminated the concept of special stamps for surplus foods. And the Agriculture Department indicated the emphasis would be now on increasing the consumption of perishable produce. The decision still provided great advantages for retailers. And the political choice to eliminate the required purchase of surplus produce created financial gains for the producers and distributors of processed foods. Now, it might surprise you to learn, given the current demographics of the whole kerfuffle surrounding food stamp benefits, that the most vociferous opposition to Kennedy's restarting of the food stamp program came from the leaders of the Black Civil Rights Movement. And I'm going to read a couple of excerpts from the book Food Power Politics by Bobby J. Smith, published in 2023. Begin quote. This move, however, was heavily resisted by representatives of the civil rights movement. Black sharecroppers, already pushed out of agricultural work due to mechanization, lost their source of income to purchase food stamps. While white-based grocers grew profits as a result of food stamps, plantation owners utilized food stamps as leverage against former black sharecroppers. This leverage looked like taking food stamp costs out of a sharecropper's income, permitting food stamps for only select grocers, permitting food stamps for only the most expensive products, and similar maneuvers. These mechanisms consolidated white power over sharecroppers, and the move to food stamps was criticized by many black activists, end quote. So Kennedy and the Democrats managed to get 2 additional 1-year extensions of the food stamp program for fiscal years 1962 and 63, and then Kennedy gets killed. And Lyndon Baines Johnson is your president now. And he says that in honor of the memory of our fallen president, even though I hated his guts and he hated my guts, but that's not important now, as part of my war on poverty, we are going to make food stamps permanent. And so arrives the Food Stamp Act of 1964, which remains in force today, and let's be honest about this. Johnson's war on poverty didn't have a damn thing to do with ending poverty. It had everything to do with weaponizing poverty to the political advantage of the Democrat Party. And he said it himself right out loud. It was captured on Kennedy's Oval Office tape recording machine, the same tape recording machine that later brought down Nixon. He said, if we get the blacks permanently on these welfare programs, only he didn't say blacks. There was a different word that he preferred. They will be captive voters for us until the end of time. And he wasn't wrong. The Democrats got exactly what they wanted. Meanwhile, black Americans got the destruction of their family units, the wholesale degradation of their culture, and an endemic entitlement mentality because, let's call things what they are. Johnson's war on poverty created a permission structure where you get more money from the government the worse you behave. And it's now a multi-generational entitlement mentality based on that permanent structure. Either I get my food for free from the government, or I will loot the grocery store. But I will still dutifully vote for the Democrats each time there is an election, and it will never occur to me that I have sold my self-respect to a political party that does not give 2 squirts about me. I'm done, that's all I've got. This has been Curmudgeon's Corner for Thursday the 30th of October. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time. Get off my lawn.